and that should say recording at your end. Peter McGlashan, thank you. I love getting to talk to people who I haven't had a chance to talk to for a long time. I also love getting to talk to people that have blazed their own trail in a way and done things differently, had their own ideas, and then sometimes to their detriment. But you've come through the other side, if that all makes sense. Hi Pete, welcome. How are you?
Yeah, long time no talk. It's funny when you follow people on social media, you feel like you know everything about them, and then you actually have a chat or you zoom in as we are, and you realise it's actually been a while.
It has been a while. I'm going to go back, so it's going to be at least 10 years since I would have, maybe 11 years since I played against you. And I have memories of you ruining Wellington in white ball format, basically. You ended a few of our campaigns. James Franklin and Mark Gillespie, I think you particularly took a fondness to. I got hurt as well. I'm not taking anything away there, but you did things differently back then, didn't you?
Yeah, I guess I was always one of those kids who was trying to find. I was a curious kid, and I was trying to pull things apart and reconfigure them. And my cricket was kind of the same. I know a lot of people struggled with their year at the New Zealand Cricket Academy. It didn't. There's a lot of players that didn't help their time down in Christchurch, but for me, it gave me a lot of time to think and explore parts of my game that were kind of undiscovered. I was at the Cricket Academy just as Cricket Max was sort of starting to be played around the place, just before T20s. And, I kind of realised I was never going to be a big muscly guy. I was at the academy with Scotty Styris, so there was the power of Styris showing us how to be devastating in one way. And then there was little weedy guys like me who, if we wanted to play the most attractive and the one that people came to watch, I had to find a way to do things differently. So I kind of scoured the globe for people who did things a little bit differently. Maynard was one of them, and Craig Spearman was another, who was kind of trying to work out how they could impose themselves on bowlers and almost get the bowler to bowl where they wanted it to be, to bowl to their strengths. And I think that was probably the thing that I managed to do quite well. It's funny you mentioned Frankie and Dizzy Gillespie. Those were two guys that I always had a lot of confidence playing against, because I felt like I knew what they were going to do when they were under pressure. And that's probably why my game went better at domestic level, where I got a chance to build up a dossier on how these guys performed under pressure, which I didn't have when I played international cricket. So
yeah, interesting. Did you so Martin Spates was playing for Wellington. This is back before I was even involved really with cricket. Did you come across much of him?
No, I didn't. I didn't see much of him. So he was an overseas pro for
overseas
Wellington.
England, yeah, and he was one of the first guys I saw sort of play the reverse sweep a lot. Especially in short format cricket. I just wondered if there was, when you mentioned Maynard and Spearman, if you'd sort of come across them.
Spears.
Yeah, I didn't like bowling at him, that's for sure. He took his thigh pad off one day in a 4-day game, and then shouted at the ball to get up and get over when he hit me over the small, what doesn't exist anymore, the small grandstand at McLean Park. That wasn't a particularly good day. What part of his game did you take? Because he was brutal.
Spears was brutal, but he was his own. Again, he was his own man, and he had a way that he liked to play, and it was very difficult to ask him to do anything different than that. And he started to bat right back in his box in the T20 days. I think he probably copied off Maynard and some of these other players that were being quite innovative at the time. He batted right up against the stumps, and all of a sudden a Yorker ball, which most players would have clamped down on, all of a sudden he had a bit of length to work with. Sorry, the 3-year-old's just arrived.
Yoda.
Say hi.
Yoda.
This is Afi.
Afi. Straight into Dad's, little cuddle, shy cuddle, nice.
Yeah. So cool. There's a lot of players like that which I kind of learnt off over the years, and I realised that you can have one as well. We'll see how long this goes before we have to pause.
Okay, all good.
And so, yeah, it gave me a chance at, at the Cricket Academy, you're essentially in lockdown, a little bit like now due to the COVID-19 virus as we are here in New Zealand. But you're in lockdown and you're stuck there with a bowling machine and long nights and lots of people who are also trying to grow and learn and expand their game. And it did lead to a lot of those conversations, which, we get as cricketers. Cricket takes so long. We spend so much time sitting in the change room together. There's a lot of crap being spoken about, but every now and again, there's moments of brilliance where a few people get together in a corner and kind of unpackage something. And I mean, you would have been the same as a bowler. You could probably count on one hand the number of moments where just you and someone in a slow, quiet conversation in a corner all of a sudden unlocked something against a certain player or a strategy which was going to help. I guess I was a player who was looking for those.
We had a few like I'd like to claim that I discovered what is the Marshall plan, for the Marshall brothers, that we sort of unlocked, certainly in a red ball game, that we unlocked a plan that shut them down and actually got them out. And in terms of overall, that one is the one that stands out when you actually go, right, here's a player, we know what he likes to do, and this is how we can give him that option, but take it away. So there was a few times, when you sit down and you go, gee whiz, got a plan. Apart from angle it in, nibble it away, top of off. there are very, very few and far between times where you go, right, I got this guy, I've worked him out, and we can now get him out, or we can bowl to him.
Did that happen in a bowling meeting, or did that happen over a coffee or somewhere? Because that's for me is kind of the challenge for the structure of coaching and the structure of how we approach things like that.
I have a feeling that happened during a game, and it was just something, because I always used to try and get around the crease when I was bowling, when it was reasonably flat, and I'd try and get as wide as I could sometimes, and I wouldn't hide that I was coming in from wide. Here's the other one, kia ora. Hey.
This is Ian. I used to play cricket with Ian. We're just having an interview, so do you guys want to head outside?
I used to try and hit him, and he used to hit me. All good. No, all good. No, just going back to the Marshall plan, I think it happened during a game, because he was just cutting us, and I don't, now I'm not trying to claim it, but I don't know if this came before or after or whatever it was, but I just thought, well, if he's trying to cut us, I'm going to still try and bowl it as off stump, but I'm going to come from as wide as I can, so it looks like he can cut it because of the width, but I'm still aiming for his off stump. So if I was stump to stump, there's still width for him to work with. But if I'm wide and coming into off stump, it looks like there's width, but there isn't any. And that we shut him down, and we ended up getting him out quite a few times. And I passed it on to a few counties in the UK as well. While Marshy was playing, while Hamish was at Gloucester, and it's the one bit that I go like, gee whiz, worked him out, got him, worked out a way to shut someone down. But it doesn't happen very often. But you did it with numerous bowlers. You worked them out, and you said you could read them. Now that is time, but how else did you read them? How else did you get in front? Where else? What else was your cue? Your subconscious? Was there anything else ticking?
Yeah, well, I guess being a wicketkeeper helps. So you do watch the game quite differently. You're looking for the way the surface is playing. You probably pay a little bit more attention to the minor details in a player's performance. Being really lucky having good coaching. So guys like Mike Shrimpton and Tony Sale, when I was growing up, were some of the best coaches in the country, and they both happened to be at the same high school as me when I was there. So they weren't the sort of coaches who told you how to do things. They were sort of coaches that encouraged you to problem solve and critique and pick apart how you. I remember standing in the boys' first 11 training in the nets. I'm just going to close this so I don't get the kids' commentary. As a high school kid, with Mike Shrimpton standing behind the nets and just saying, right, hit the next ball inside out over cover as the guy's halfway through his runner.
Yeah.
And without telling me how to do it, I
Mm-hmm.
had to go back in all those sessions in the gymnasium with the tennis balls and what shape I needed to get my body into to access inside out over cover. And that was just the type of amazing coach Shimpo was. And that sense of problem solving and detection of weaknesses. But also I think the bit that helped me was the psychology. So I knew when Andre Adams was under pressure, he'd bowl a certain ball. When Paul Hitchcock was under pressure, he'd go to a Yorker. When James Franklin was under pressure, he'd do something. So my big thing was paddle sweeping, and getting down and scoring against the Yorker. So if I put a player under pressure and I knew that their plan B was a Yorker, then they were actually playing into my strength.
Would you try and,
if I put them under pressure, what is their backup plan?
Yeah, would you try and set that up earlier in the over? Would you try, or is that something that would just there's a thing that I call the opposite ball in when we're bowling, and obviously when it happens a lot when we get cut, very, very rarely the bowler bowls the opposite and you get driven and there's 2 fours in the back of 2 balls. Did you sit on those sorts of and that happens way too often and bowlers just can't fix it still. Did you sit on those sort of that little bit of knowledge, that little bit of sitting back and watching, gee whiz, cut and drive and drive and cut and plan the over out?
Not so much. I definitely took them as individual moments. But what I tended to do is try and again try and read the captain, read the opposition captain, what he was trying to do, read the bowler, work out if those 2 plans were in sync. Because there was sometimes you could tell that the captain wanted one thing because of the field that he'd set, but then your knowledge of the bowler was, well, they're not actually going to do that. Be it ego, be it skill set, be it expertise. You can't there's no point a captain setting a field for a Yorker if the bowler only has a 70% strike rate of executing Yorkers. So those types of things, it would be a culmination. It was pretty rare that I would look at 6 balls and kind of treat them as a collective. I was very much a player who was trying to score as many as I could off each ball. I was a big numbers man. I loved maths as a kid. You know, I was really big on 12, 14, 36 off 19. That's don't stress. We can aim at that. Whereas I think a lot of players, when the numbers got too big, their thinking clouded over, and the tunnel vision came in. Whereas I was more often than not, I was pretty calm under those conditions. I had multiple scoring options because I'd practiced them, and I had a good understanding of what the opposition bowler was probably trying to do.
You said earlier in this that what held you back internationally was that you didn't have enough of the database in your head of the bowlers that you were gonna play against. Now, so you having that database domestically kind of held you back? Do you see, like you couldn't play? You would play the bowler as opposed to playing the situation. You wanted to play the bowler. You wanted to know what he was going to do. So couldn't adjust that and play the international bowler. You couldn't play him either.
Yeah, I don't think I was quite sharp enough to play the ball just as it came down. I needed to have enough of the odds and a hunch on, the laws of probability of what this will probably be to actually execute what I was doing. I was never a good hooker of the ball. I wasn't an instinctive player of the short ball. I wasn't sharp enough on my feet. It just wasn't a strength that I had. So I kind of needed to know that this guy's probably going to do this to be able to execute it well. And when I went up to the international level, I played about a dozen or 15 T20s and 4 one-dayers. My 4 one-dayers were all against India. So, over the course of that 4-game series, I could build up a bit of an understanding of how they would respond. But my T20s were all over the place. It was that World Cup that we played together, play one team each. Very rarely do you get to play a team more than once. And And again, batting way down the order, as a new guy to international cricket, I didn't have the confidence to walk into the coaching staff and say, right, I want the last 400 deliveries that Zahir Khan's bowled, so that I can build up that background knowledge of what he will do if I hit one through the covers for 4. What's he going to do next? And the only way to do that, the way that I'd done it in domestic, was to have played those games. I never really felt confident in my place in the New Zealand team, and so therefore didn't have the confidence to walk in and, you know, bang my fist on the table to the video analyst and say, right, you and I are going to spend the next 2 hours working this out, because there were 5, 6, 7, 8 other batsmen ahead of me, and I always felt like I was only there for a short time rather than a long time.
Did you feel that you had to bang your fists as opposed to just in terms of comfortability? Because I struggled in that group, and I don't think we're terribly different in that. I struggled in that group because everyone was just so freaking amazing, and I'm still in awe of the guys that I played with. I'm still nervous about talking to them and being around them, and to this day, you know, and it still scares me a bit, because these guys are those guys. Did you feel that it was so intimidating that you had to bang like you couldn't, but you wanted to bang a fist and say, what about me?
Well, I mean, I didn't even demand that in the domestic team. So I guess I kind of regard my career was definitely one of two halves. You know, up until I was 20, 21, things had come pretty easily. I'd gone through the New Zealand system. I'd made all the age group teams that I'd wanted. And then I got to about 20, and Martin Sigley was the 4-day keeper and for Central Districts, and Bevan Griggs was the 1-day keeper for Central Districts. And, you know, all of a sudden I couldn't get in our domestic team for CD, a team that I'd played for age group. My grandfather had played for them. Like, it meant a lot to play for CD. And so I was kind of stuck. And then while I was kind of one of the reserves for CD, I got a call. Well, Mark Greatpatch was coach of CD. He got a call from Otago to say, look, Otago are pretty confident Brendan McCullum was going to be the New Zealand keeper for the next tour. Pete's not doing anything. Would you guys be willing to release him to go down and play for Otago? And so Batch, to his credit, came to me and said, look, mate, you're kind of second or third cab off the rank at the moment. You know, you're probably two batters away from getting a crack, even just as a batter, or you can go to Otago and Brendan's going to be away all summer and you'll pretty much play straight away. So, you know, I was very grateful of that. I went for it to Otago. I had a year for them. Did pretty well considering. I came in halfway through. Had to do a lot of growing up. You know, it's the first time I'd been away from CD and Hawke's Bay, really, other than to uni. And I kind of realised that I had to go in there and make an impression as an outsider.
Did you? And stop there, because that's exactly that thing. That point, and that word is perfect. Matching up with you staying. Words often. Sometimes the words we choose says more about the words that we actually meant to use. And you said just then the word being an outsider, and just earlier you said about, you know, banging the table in it and making a deal of it, when the rational mind says we could have just gone and asked someone really politely and nicely, as a person does, and we might be an outsider in a new team, but we're still one of the cogs of that new team. Is that something that is part of you, that I'm not projecting, but the insecurity in me always came across as being an outsider, being an arrogant, being a bit of a dick? Is there an element that something sort of similar in there with you?
Well, I think until that time, cricket had always been really easy, and you know, I hadn't asked to be picked for these teams. No, but like,
that's awesome.
I'd gone through the New Zealand system. Things had happened. Like my year with the New Zealand under-19. So, you know, I was up against Michael Paps as the other wicketkeeper batsman for the New Zealand under-19s. We were going head-to-head. Paps, who was more a batter that kept. I was a keeper that batted. That was the perception. They couldn't separate us come the trial. We both went to South Africa for the under-19 World Cup. And even, you know, the night before the tournament started, no one in Italy, you know, all up in the air until the first morning of the opening ceremony. We were a couple of days away from playing our first game. The opening ceremony, I'm down at breakfast and everyone's like, whoa, did you hear about Pepsi? And I was like, whoa, what happened? Oh, he dislocated his shoulder in the swimming pool. He's going home this afternoon. And I'm like, there's a little voice in my head going, wow, sweet, that means you're playing.
Yeah.
And then there's another part going, oh my God, that means you're playing.
Yeah.
And all of that competition and that rivalry and that thing which had driven you, all of a sudden, Pepsi, due to his misfortune, had dislocated his shoulder in the pool and he was out of it. So that then kind of brought on a little bit of a complacency in the fact that, oh, well, I'm in now, so I can, I don't need to fight quite as hard or work quite as hard. And we did pretty well through the tournament. We got right through until the semi-final, well, it was roughly semi-final against South Africa, where Hamish Marshall had come in as a replacement for Pepsi. Hamish was keeping, they chose him to keep ahead of me.
Wow.
And Hamish had never, I don't think he'd even kept in like an intermediate school game, let alone first class or
Wow.
19s. But again, it was just one of those decisions where that was the first time where you're kind of faced with the fact that selections aren't going to go your way. It didn't matter that you're the number one keeper in the team. They were willing to roll the dice because either A, the coaches didn't understand the role that the wicketkeeper played, or you hadn't been good enough in that role to put yourself ahead of someone who had just been handed a pair of gloves. Marshy, unfortunately for me, butchered a run out and didn't do a particularly good job at Newland. So I got to play in the final. James Franklin and I put on about 100. I got 50 odd and Frankie got 50 odd as well, I think. But we lost to England in the Under-19 World Cup. And it was kind of that thing where that was the last roller coaster before, that was the high of the roller coaster before I came back to New Zealand and things started to go amiss. Because I went from that Otago side, missed out on a contract because Brendan moved to Canterbury for family reasons. Hoppy then moved from Canterbury. Gareth Hopkins moved from Canterbury to Otago. So I missed out on a contract. So went back to Auckland, carried on studying and trialled for the Auckland second 11 and missed out on that. So I went from playing first class cricket for Otago one summer to being non-travelling reserve for the Auckland second 11 the following summer. And I kind of accepted that was it. I wasn't going to play cricket ever again.
When did that feel like a personal thing? When did that become, geez, it's not about my cricket, it's about Pete? When did it become a personal thing to you?
The winter where I missed out on a contract and Gareth Hopkins came down and picked up the contract.
Yeah,
I argued the point with the selectors, with the coach, who was that was me pointing in other directions. That was me saying, I scored this, he's only got that. I had the wrong attitude to being dropped, and I had resigned myself to the fact that maybe that's who I was. Maybe I wasn't ever good enough to do this. Maybe I was always going to be someone who, played age group cricket and then didn't play much after that. So I had 2 summers playing club cricket in Auckland as a player coach.
Wow.
And then Robbie Hart retired out of the blue. Robbie Hart had his contract. Yep. And then 2 months before the season started for the Northern Districts, he retired. So he went from being the captain for 7 or 8 years to all of a sudden not playing cricket anymore. And BJ Watling was only about 17, 18. Yep. They weren't sure if he was going to be good enough, which is quite funny now because he's the highest test wicket-keeping dismissal holder. Yeah. And they asked me to come and trial. And I kind of saw it as a new lease on life. My cricket after that was much more free-flowing. I played with a freedom and vigour which came from it being a second chance, and I took every single game I played after that as kind of my last one, and that's when I played my best cricket. That's when I got a chance to play for New Zealand. That's when I got a chance to kind of dominate the domestic white ball competitions for a while, and I guess fortunately I got to go out on my own terms as well.
I will come back to that, but I guess getting around all but Canterbury and Wellington, you knew the bowling attacks pretty well, didn't you? So you had plenty of database up there.
Totally, just locking it all in, just adding it all up.
So you did get out on your own terms, but there's a load more that in between when you finished and when you were playing and during you were playing. But getting out on your own terms, now that resonates with me because I was one of the very few. There is, like you, there is so few that actually go, do you know what? This is me. I'm done for whatever reasons. When did you make that decision, and how did you do it? What was the? Because it's not easy.
No, and it came as a bit of a surprise, really. My last 3 or 4 years of playing first class cricket, I had spent every winter, doing different jobs. So I'd seen players around me get stuck in that routine of summer in New Zealand, summer in England, summer in New Zealand, summer in England. Weren't really getting ready for life after sport. And so probably I did that. I played for Bath and Clevedon, and really enjoyed my time for them, and we had some good success. But in the last 4 or 5 years of professional cricket, I definitely got the sense that I needed to work out what life after sport was going to be, just in case it wasn't on my terms. A couple of years, I got the #1 domestic contract for Northern Districts. I never got a New Zealand contract while I played. But for the last couple of years, I kind of went from #1 contract to #2, #2 to #3. And, the writing was on the wall. BJ had just made the test team. That I needed to be kind of ready for when the guillotine swung. So each winter I kind of tried different things. I did a bit of work for Sky TV and on the rugby channel, producing stuff for them. I did some marketing stuff. I obviously designed some gear, which you used, those famous Aero pads. And I just kind of explored what life might look like after sport. But when it finished, it was a strange one. I didn't know it was going to be my last first class game. My last first class game was in Napier. On the end, I think we'd fielded all day the first day, and I got a phone call about 7 o'clock as I was sitting in an Indian restaurant getting takeaway after a long day in the field from my mum to say, "Hey, look, your grandmother's curtains haven't been opened today. Can you pop round and just check that she's okay?" And Mum and Dad were about half an hour away out in the country. I just happened to be playing in Napier. I could have been playing in anywhere. And we're staying in town, and I said, "Yeah, no problems." It was unusual for her to do that. And so I popped round, and kind of as soon as I arrived, I knew that it was too quiet. Grabbed the spare key, opened the door, walked down the corridor, and it was just, it was cold and quiet. And I found my grandmother passed away in bed. She'd just never woken up. So I sat with her for a bit. I called Mum and Dad, and I got them to come in. Once they came in, I rang the coach. I went back to the hotel, and I told my roommate I'm not coming back. My grandmother's just passed away. I've just found her, and I'll let the coach know what's going to happen over the next few days. It was the last game of the season. If we got first innings points, we were going to win the title. There's all of these things going on. But I had to put family first. So I had the second day off from memory. Our guys batted. We were chasing down first innings points. I helped kind of get some of the funeral stuff organised. Third day, we needed about 100 to get first innings points. 3 wickets in hand. I'd been keeping track of the score online. And so I went back and I batted for about an hour with Brent Arnell, kind of tears streaming down my face, trying to get us through, and fell agonisingly short. Fell like 15 runs short, and I just lost it as I walked off the field, just bawling, put my keeping gear on, went out to keep, and about an hour or so later, we found out that one of the other games had, something had happened in one of the other games, and we got close enough to win the title. So I walked off, said to the coach, "Look, you don't need me here now. We've won the title. I'm off." And so we won the title. I wasn't there for it. We were there for the funeral. Couldn't go to prize giving because we were still down in Napier. And a month later, got offered a job for the winter, doing some work in the domestic violence sector, which I'd been doing for a bit, and kind of realised that that's the job I could do after cricket. A lot of the other jobs had been more about ruling out other options, doing, television, and realising I didn't want to do that, doing marketing, and I didn't want to do that. But this was one where I thought, actually, if that was my last game, it's a good time to move. And it's only after reflecting that I kind of realised that it was just as much about the fact that, my grandmother had passed away in that last game, and cricket takes up so much of our lives. We give up. I mean, I'd hate to think if you added up all the days of your life that you were playing cricket, and what we could have done with those, that people that mean a lot to us. You know, I couldn't get married and have kids until I finished playing cricket. I just couldn't. I didn't have enough time for a partner, really. And you know, I really admire the guys that managed to continue playing and coaching, for that matter, the ones that go on to coach, and their lifestyle doesn't change if they go on to coach. It's really hard on families. Cricket's one of those sports, and you know, I understand your track record as well. It attracts people who for whatever reason face challenges, and there's something about the strength it requires to walk out there and face someone who could potentially harm you, or to be isolated from your teammates, surrounded by 11 other people when the rest of your mates are 70 meters away in lounge chairs eating toasted sandwiches
and drinking
There's
coffee.
something about that which kind of, yeah. But it's a bloody tough sport. You know, we go, more often than not, you fail. Even club cricketers, I don't know how they do it. They go along to games, they don't bowl, they bat number 11, they drop catches, and they walk home and they tell their boyfriends and girlfriends that, yeah, it was a good day, everything was fine. But the reality is we fail more often than not in cricket. And it was one of those kind of aha moments where I realised I've given up enough for this sport and it's time to move away. It's not the end of my involvement with cricket. Like I spent the next 5 years in a governance role for Northern Districts as a director, and have continued on with the radio commentary, and that keeps me in touch. But it means that I don't have to play anymore.
Which you enjoy? Do you miss not playing? And let me rephrase that. Let me rephrase that. Do you miss that little bit of competition versus playing?
I miss the performance. I miss, you know, when he'd 14 off the last six balls, and I know how to do this. Yeah, I miss the challenge of putting on a performance, which is deeply satisfying, you know.
No, I went back. I sort of tried to not play, and I went back and played a little bit a couple of years ago, and I didn't want to play because my body is it's horrible. It ruined, and I have to eat too many pills, etc., etc. It's the same story every fast bowler. But I had a left-hander who I've been working on, and right, I'm going to come around the wicket. I'm going to sit 2 slips, 2 gullies. It's going to come to that first gully. 2 balls into it, went to that first gully exactly how I planned it, and it's like, oh my gosh, you know, there's just that. You still get the tingle. You still like, it's still there. Yeah. And then you wake up the next day and it's like, nah, I have got no more time for that. I have got 0 time for that. But if I can just go and bowl a couple of those to lefties, you're like, oh. And so I miss that competition. I miss that ability to go to every now and again paint some art, you know, like do something that is kind of memorable, if you like. But I don't miss playing at all. It's do you hurt, or are you pretty good? I mean, you weren't too heavy. Your body was pretty good, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've broken every finger other than my ring finger. So I get up. Don't enjoy the cold weather. Makes it a bit of a mission typing because my fingers kind of point in strange directions. A little bit of back trouble, but nothing too bad. Like I didn't ever need any major surgeries, which I'm really lucky with. You know, I see BJ at the moment, all the hip trouble that he's had. Yeah. Obviously, Brendan with his knees. Yeah. So I was pretty fortunate in that respect. But yeah, just backaches and stuff. And you know, I guess I'm quite fortunate with my genetic makeup. I'm the heaviest I've ever been, but that's only like 87 kilos or something. So it doesn't matter how much I drink or eat.
That was my fighting weight.
They're keeping me skinny.
That was my fighting weight. I'm a bit more than that now. Whatever. Cheers. Yeah. Hey, you were always in front of the game in terms of your preparation and a lot of the skills and a lot of some of the ideas that you brought to cricket, and also in some of the products that. Give us a rundown on how your relationship with Aero happened, with Oboe as it was, and then Aero, and how that happened, And how the hell did those pads come to exist, Pete?
Yeah, a lot of drugs, not smoked by me. But so those batting pads came about from a guy called Roger Bradley,
Yep.
working with Simon, the guy in charge of oboe hockey.
Uh-huh.
And Roger was playing cricket in the Netherlands, and so potentially participating in
Cafes
sludge
only.
products.
Cafes only.
Cafes only. And so Roger was selling hockey gear all winter, and then coming the summer, he was like, this stuff would still work for cricket. And Simon was like, no, don't be silly. And he's like, no, seriously, the foam still protects you. Your goalkeeping pads control the direction of the rebounds. That can actually be quite helpful for controlling where the ball goes for close-in fielders. It makes no sense that batting pads are symmetrical. The front pad does a completely different function to the back pad. Why don't we make some cricket gear? It'll give your factory something to do during the summer when they're not doing much. And so Roger and Simon partnered up, and they created originally oboe cricket. Lorne Howell was the first person I saw wearing a pair.
Yep.
And Lorne is another character who was always willing to think of a little bit left field and do things a bit differently. And he was wearing them in kind of club cricket. He was playing for Northern Districts at the time. I saw them, thought, yeah, that's a bit of me. I read kind of the blurb, and it was about, multiple channels and chambers, and, depending on the position of your front foot, if you get hit on the pad here, you could actually choose if there's a close-in fielder on the leg side, an inside edge would be going that way, and that made total sense to me. Particularly for my white ball cricket, though, it meant that I was faster between the wickets. And so that just was a bit of a no-brainer to me. I knew there was no close-in fielders for white ball cricket, so if the ball rebounds further and I get more leg buys for it, then that's a bonus. So I wore them for only the second or third time in Masterton of all places.
So what
I didn't know is that Roger Bradley, the founder of the company, had popped over from Palmerston North to watch the game.
But you got in touch with them
to
say, can I have some of them, please?
From memory, Lorne had Lorne had a pair that he had got from them. And I think from memory, I asked him for a pair, like, can you get a couple of black pairs, and I'll wear a set because I like the concept. And so only in about the second or third game that I'd worn them, Northern Districts versus Central Districts in Masterton, Roger Bradley popped over. I think I got 30 odd not out or something. And he just came up to me after the game, after we were packing up the minibus, and he said, oh, what did you think of the pads? And I said, oh, yeah, they're a bit different, but and I'm the only one willing to try them, but they're real fast between the wickets, and I feel like I can move better. Yeah, I think they're pretty good. Why is that? And he said, oh, I owned them. They're my company. I told him about some of the stuff that I'd done, the fact that I mean, yeah, he was one of those guys. Roger Bradley was a mad scientist. He was a guy born before his time. And so we chatted. I told him I had a background in biomechanics. I'd just finished doing some research for Nike for their latest cricket shoes, which I was also wearing, which was a prototype. And he said, oh, you're exactly the type of person I'd like to have working for me one day. If I can get some money together, I'll give you a job. And I was like, I kind of said thanks, but I didn't really think much of it. And then about 3 or 4 months later, he called back and he said, hey, I've got some money from New Zealand Trade and Enterprise or Callahan or someone. Why don't you come and work for us in Palmy, and we'll see what we can do. And so my first job was to create some batting gloves for Aero, which I kind of were like a Frankenstein version of a golf glove. I didn't have a background in design. I had a background in biomechanics, so I understood how the body worked, but I didn't understand from a concept, prototype, production. And so the first batting glove I made using all the knowledge that I had, but no concept of how much it would cost. And so they costed it up, and it was going to cost like $450 to make. And so it was completely unviable. It was never going to sell in the shop. But the elements of it were there. It was about moisture management, grip, and protection. And every product that we made, we broke it down into performance elements. It had to perform first. didn't necessarily matter what it looked like, because we backed ourselves that we were doing it for the right reason. And that's why the products took a while to sell, and that's why, you know, in many ways they're kind of ahead of their time. That the Puma batting pad that Brendan McCullum wore was much more like an aero pad than a traditional pad, and if we hadn't done what we'd done, I don't think it would have. They wouldn't have. The other companies wouldn't have kind of been willing to push out the same with the stand-up bag. You know, like Aero was the first one to develop the stand-up bag. Took up less space in the change room, which is always a bugbear. Everything was where you needed it to be. And again, all the other companies copied that as well. So, yeah, I just really enjoyed it. He was a guy that was willing to try things. You know, I had some amazing memories of working for Roger over the years. It was such a shame he passed away when he did, so young, because who knows where it could have ended up. But and that approach to life, I think, was something that I've carried on. You know, that creativity, the problem solving, you know, that analysis of performance and understanding what works and what doesn't. And that's not just in sport, but that's in governance and the directorships that I've had, and also my other job at the university at the moment, and as an elected member for council.
And now you're getting into politics. Well, you've always been in politics, because if you play cricket, you're in politics, because there's always politics in cricket. But now it's become a part.
I mean, that was a bit of a hold with I mean, it has become part of life. I mean, it's you put it in your ears. These are the arguments I don't win. I mean, I again, like going back to that time at the Cricket Academy, I was just starting off in cricket in New Zealand when the Players Association was formed. So I kind of watched the early stages of that process. And the funny thing is, you know, high five for Ob, high five. Yeah. The funny thing is, you know, all those change rooms that we've shared over the years with people, most of them don't think of the Players Association as a union, and yet it is. It's a union. And I grew up in a family of school teachers, and so understanding the importance of the collective voice was always something that I was very conscious of. And so after
she got herself
drawn on your face, that's a vivid too. We'll clean that up after. Representing others was always something I was very conscious of, and so the Players Association was something which kind of, you know, I did pretty much right through to the end, just understanding what was going on there. The directorships I had for Northern Districts, I've only just stepped down. I was on the board of Baseball New Zealand as well, and rape prevention education. So those were all different directorships representing different bodies of people who, you know, needed a louder voice or people to be thinking on their behalf. And so the politics thing was kind of just off the back of that as well. I've been involved in some community street art work in our local area, painting murals and stuff.
Bless you.
Coughing into your elbow.
Bless you.
And had worked with local government to apply for funding and things, and had kind of been a little bit frustrated by some of the shortcomings of the thinking, you know, the fact that it was very close to home. It was less about strategic decision making, long-term vision, the greater good. It was much more about, you know, serving the small pockets of people that they had come from. So I ran for the Labour Party for the local body elections, got elected for the Maungkiki Tamaki local board, which is effectively like a small version of council. So we represent about 70,000 people in Tamaki where we live. And we make all decisions on parks and playgrounds and any public spaces, libraries, rec centres, swimming pools, building consents, anything that's at a local level that doesn't require some form of regional decision making.
Awesome. She it's like Egyptian old school makeup on an ear now, on an eye now. Yeah. She's rocking the Cleopatra. You rocking the Cleopatra, sweetheart? She's listening, but not.
No, but she can hear us. So that's
So you've used your wrong word here, but you've used your outspoken voice you know how I mean that in the not quite how I mean it, but you use that opinionated, considered voice for good now.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because it all probably stems back to the day that Deepak Patel came to me and said that I hadn't been picked for CD because I didn't make enough noise when I was fielding.
Yeah.
And ever since then, it was one of those cases where I was, again, going back to like, what was I judged on? I wasn't judged on my wicket keeping that day. I was judged on the amount of noise and energy that I gave to the team.
Yeah.
And because, back then wicket keepers were cheerleaders. And so, which is quite different to the way the English team have approached, well, traditionally English anyway, like, it's been about glove work. It's been about just doing your job. Whereas in New Zealand for a while, it was definitely about kind of who's the biggest rah-rah person to get the rest of the fielder's energy up.
Yeah.
And, again, that was one of those moments where I had to break out of the shell of who I naturally was and almost become someone else when I crossed the white line. And it often wasn't the person that was sitting in the change room in the corner getting the gear on. It was a persona that I had to wear when I walked across the white line because I was told that was value.
How tiring was that, bro? How tiring in terms of emotional energy? Because this is where I'm going in terms of I'm going back to university and I'm digging into emotions and sleep and performance, etc. How tiring is it? And I know from my own perspective, it's stupidly tiring trying to be someone else that whole time you're playing cricket. How hard was that for you to bust out of and be a different person and put on a new mask and go out there and do your thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was kind of nonsensical. Like, it was false, and like I had to train it, and sometimes it felt like a pantomime. And those long days in the field where you've been in the field for like a day and a half, 120 overs, and that's when it just gets ludicrous. Like, you all start giggling with each other because you're making stupid noises for the sake of doing it because the coach has told you that you've got to show more energy. It definitely gave me a harder edge than I naturally had. I was never a very particularly combative or confrontational person, but I do feel that the longer my career went on, not so much towards the end because I'd mellowed, but there was definitely a phase between sort of 25 and 30 where I had to kind of put on this persona and become more aggressive. And I didn't necessarily like the person that I was on the field.
Through an insecurity or through being tired or through you just felt like you had to be a bit more alpha?
Yeah, a bit more alpha. Like I wasn't alpha anywhere else, like, I was bullied as a kid. I was the one, dragged around the cloak bay, knocking the bags off the hooks as they swung you around. Like, I was one of those ones. I was never the alpha. And so in the cricket world, there were places for that, but at the same time, it kind of felt like to get noticed. Wicket keepers are only one person in a team. Like, you can be a fast bowler and you're up against two or three other players. You can be a batter and you're up against two or three other players. But there was only 6 of them that played for New Zealand. And so it really did mean that you matched yourself much more closely with who your opposition was than if as an opening bowler you were competing against a dozen or 15 other opening bowlers across the whole country. And so I kind of became, I think, to walk into that field was all the work in the media and the fact that I was used to being criticised publicly. I was used to people calling radio sport and saying that McGlashan is not good enough to be there, and why don't they give someone else a go? And so I had a thick skin built up from professional sport, particularly cricket, where we're so hard on each other with the mental disintegration and stuff. There was a thick skin that had developed over the years, which had protected me from anything that would harm me, which actually meant if I was going to get into politics, even at a lower level, it was going to be water off the duck's back because, I've been called much worse things in the past. And that ability to stand up in front of an audience and just kind of command the space and be confident in who I am and bullshit my way through stuff sometimes, totally able to do that.
Yeah.
So it kind of wasn't quite as daunting as I thought it might be. At the moment, it's just local government stuff, and it's, we run campaigns, we door knock, we have, town hall debates come election time. It'll be a different story if I try and take the step up and get into national politics. in many ways, it's like professional cricket. I'd end up on the road much more. I'd end up away from my family a lot more. And I'm just not sure. Well, I'm not ready to do that in the next foreseeable future, but maybe in the long term.
Mate,
I'm only 40, so
why would you? You got three great looking girls at your place. Why would you ditch it? Why would you get out? Stay at home, bro.
Well, the thing is, the local government stuff is only 1 day a week. Like, it's only about 10 or 12 hours a week. So I've still got my other job, still got my full-time job at AET University. And again, that's a wonderful role where I'm effectively the conduit between the academic expertise and the outside world, and I'm almost the translator who joins the dots between these amazing, experts in their field with the outside world and trying to make it relevant. So it's definitely that problem-solving role, working for the university. But the world's a strange place at the moment with COVID-19. We're on about day 4 of lockdown, not being allowed to leave the house. And
I've had mum and dad.
Very different once
I've
we're
had
allowed back
dad
out.
locked down for about 10 days at the moment. I've had maybe even 11 days. I got them locked away early because I did not want, I didn't want to get sick, and B, definitely didn't want them getting sick. So they're just today starting to go a little bit loopy, which is fine. I'll have to put another Adam Sandler movie on and take it away. My man, hey, this has been awesome. This has been cool chat. One little bit. Did you, because you're so proud of your heritage, did you ever feel that you had to promote that when you were playing? Did you ever feel that you had to wear that as a badge when you were playing cricket? Because there isn't many, whether it be Polynesian or Māori representation in cricket. Did you feel that you had to wear it a little bit bigger than maybe it became a bigger part of you than it maybe had to be?
No, in many ways it didn't. Like, I'm still really proud. So there's only ever been, I think, one proper New Zealand Māori team, and I was in that team with a 17-year-old Jesse Ryder, 16, 17-year-old Jesse Ryder, and
captained by the whitest Māori I've ever.
And most of the rest of the team were Wellingtonians, actually, which you guys, Lee Kelly and the rest of the boys. But unfortunately, that was kind of all New Zealand cricket did after that. There's been a little bit recently, which is awesome to see. But that was very much a one-off. And I think if I had played more games for New Zealand, it might have been a bit more of a vehicle to promote Māori playing the game more. But I suspect just because I was always a fringe player who was filling the seat until Brendan got back or someone else came back from injury, that was never attached to me per se. I was always known for the Inspector Gadget innovation stuff much more than being Māori. And that's kind of been life, not having a Māori name, not being particularly dark-skinned. I was always probably treated more Pākehā than anything else. But it's always been something that's been there. And it's probably only been in the last 5 years where it's kind of been had that sense of ownership. And I got Tāmoko last year for my 40th birthday all the way up. And it's kind of, it feels like it's always been there. It's just come to the surface. And we made a conscious decision with our girls as well. Again, New Zealand cricket in particular has missed the trick a little bit. I think there's a huge amount of potential in Māori and Pacific players, particularly in the T20 format. If there was a way to introduce them, that's going to be how it's done. And there are slow elements of that coming into some initiatives. A high school team, a New Zealand Māori women's team, I think I saw something about. But it's just happening in pockets. And unfortunately for me, it was just happening too slowly. I got in trouble a little bit with about equal pay and increasing the pay for women. And so I just decided to tap out of cricket governance. I was on the board of baseball, and that was exciting. And I always felt cricket had a lot to learn off baseball, and baseball had a lot to learn off cricket. So it was an exciting time to be involved with them.
I'm certainly going to catch up with, have a chat to your sister at some stage as well about her life in cricket, because there is two kids that that succeeded beyond a family's sort of wildest dreams, but two very different pay scales to go along with it. And so I'll catch up with your sister at some stage, because she'll have a great story as well. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that now. More and more I think about it. Do you wish you had a bit more time in the New Zealand team to have then promoted that that Māori badge, the cape, the whatever it felt like?
In hindsight, no, actually. Like, I don't think it would have landed anywhere.
Sure.
I just think the leadership in the game at the time wasn't ready to be told that. You know, I had set twos with Martin Snedden and that when he was a CEO, and I was there as a player rep, kind of saying, hey, look, all you got to do is pay for a minibus. Like, we'll sort out the rest. We'll stay on Marae up the East Coast.
Yep.
We'll take some Kiwi cricket sets. It's not going to cost you a bean. We'll sort that. And it was always regarded as, you know, not priority at the moment. And so even if I had played more games for New Zealand, I don't think anyone really would have been ready to hear that story. And I kind of got the feeling that getting into governance, that was the best way to do that. And we definitely did that at a local level. You know, I put my name in the hat a couple of times for the New Zealand board, but got knocked back. So, like I said, there's no rush. Anyone who's progressively thinking kind of needs to understand there's a time and a place. You know, COVID-19 is being saved by slightly more socialist political abilities at the moment, while the capitalist system falls down around us. So, you know, I think there's a time and a place for all parts of the political spectrum. We just need to respect each other and understand that there's a place for all of us, rather than trying to wipe the other side out.
Pete, Mac, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story here, but I'm gonna forwardly thank you for creating bigger and better stories for your life and for us as people, and especially in the area that you're working in now, my man. Hugely, very, very proud for you for what you're doing now. I think it suits you. I think it matches up. So, mate, that's awesome. Well done. We'll speak again pretty soon, eh?
Thanks, man. Keep in touch.
Nice one. Look after that family. As I said, you got 3 great-looking girls. Take care.
Yeah, man. Hey, and love to keep chatting while we're back in the UK, because you've done a hell of a lot more media stuff than I. So keep in touch.
Nice one. Kia ora, bro. Thank you.
Cheers, man.